keep saying good morning when it's afternoon because it's still very early morning for me. But don't I look refreshed? So today we're going to talk a little bit about content and communication, specifically how you can begin to communicate to your clients or within your organization the importance of content and of planning for content and of thinking of content as a business asset and not just as something that's going to replace all of the lorem ipsum in your designs and wireframes. So again, briefly, I'm the CEO and founder of Brain Traffic. I wrote content strategy for the web. I do a podcast called Content Talks, and I just finished hosting ConFab, our first content strategy conference. I like content strategy, in case you haven't noticed. So who's seen WALL-E? Many of you. Okay, so this is a terrific movie, right? So if you haven't seen WALL-E, I'll just give you a brief introduction. So the idea is that several years into the future, humanity has created so much trash and so much junk that we simply don't have any place left to put it. And so what that means is that it has begun to just pile up and tower over our cities, and that the earth, in fact, has become uninhabitable. So the plan then becomes to build a bunch of giant spaceships for everybody to get on the ships and basically to leave, to go into outer space. And what's left behind are millions of these little robots called WALL-Es. And their job is to compact the trash. So they go around and they scoop up this trash, from this sort of apocalyptic landscape, and they zoom around and they compress it and they pile it up into piles. Well, years go by, and the job is so difficult and so monstrous that the robots break down one by one. And when we join our hero, he is the only one left. And he is tireless. He continues to get up every single morning and go to do his job. Now, when I saw this movie for the first time, I really was moved, and I was thinking about it later, and it occurred to me that what all of that junk made me think of was content on the web, where it had just piled up so high from our organizations, from our clients, that we couldn't find anything meaningful, that it was just towering over us, and that certain corners of the web become, in fact, uninhabitable. So as WALL-E goes about his job, he carries his little cooler with him, and he brings it around because every once in a while he'll find something. And that something will be something curious or beautiful or useful that he can use to fix himself or something else within his trailer home. And you know what that reminds me of is when I actually come across a piece of content online that I think is useful or precious or entertaining or moving. And I pause and I feel this moment of satisfaction, just the way you see WALL-E. Oh, look, this is great. Puts it in his pocket. So that's how I feel about content that I care about. And then Eve flies in, his robot girlfriend, and she's there looking for signs of life. And there's a big storm, and he gets her back to his trailer, and they're all, robot love or whatever. And the very first thing he does when she enters that trailer is he begins to zoom around. Look at this thing that I found. Look at this over here. Check this out. And that, of course, is our impulse to share. This is what social media is. It's finding content that relates to us, that we care about, and we have this drive, this impulse to share that content. So my question is this. If content is so critical and so important to us, if this is the entire reason that we come online, then how is it possible that our organizations have marginalized it to the point where it has become completely out of our control? We don't know where it is. We don't know where it lives. We don't know what it says. How has this happened? And how can we begin to fix it? So I'm going to tell a brief story about myself after I drink this. So this is a diagram that I pulled off of this website several years ago called skillset.org. And it's not meant to be any kind of a prescription for what your web teams should look like. I fully recognize that very few people actually have individuals playing each of these roles. In fact, some of you may play 3 or 4 of them. Some of you may play all of them at one time. So I started out in my career as a copywriter, and I started specializing in writing for the web. And typically, when I would be called into project web teams, whether it was for organizations or agencies working with their clients, this is where I would sit. However, sadly, there was almost never a web editor, because nobody had budget for a web editor. I was the writer. I should be the editor too. No problem. And there were, lost my content strategist. Content strategist was gone too. Sorry. There was obviously never, how many of you actually work with content strategists on projects today? Okay. So of course, many years ago, there weren't content strategists around either. Also, search engine optimization specialists, not so much. I was basically being asked to imagine keywords that I thought made sense and include them in my copy. And who are we kidding? We never had those people either. So this is where I would sit on web teams, kind of off here, an island unto myself. And the thing is, before they even called me, a lot would happen. First of all, the clients would sit down around a table and begin to brainstorm. What is it that we want from our website project, and what do we want it to say, and what's wrong with our website now, and this is all very exciting, we have all this budget. But what no one was ever really talking about was where the content was going to come from. Who was going to take care of it? Who was going to be responsible for it? But that was hard, and that was messy. And besides that, we had other things to worry about. We had to create user personas and user flows. This was very important. We had to mock up our website design with a lot of lorem ipsum. We had to figure out with the content requirements and do our card sorts, and then that ended up getting us to a sitemap, and that was very exciting. And right around this time, everybody would be feeling like, yes, we've really made a lot of progress here. This is great. Okay, let's look at the schedule. What's next? Oh, look, we're so far along the way. Okay, it's time to call the copywriter. So they would call me. Course templates and everything would already be in production. And they would say, hi, come on in. And I'd sit down, usually with just the project manager. And the project manager would say, okay, here's the creative brief. Here are the user personas. Here are all of the notes that we took from our stakeholder interviews. Here's the sitemap. Here are the wireframes. Here's some technical specifications. Oh, and you're going to need to do the SEO and the metadata for all of these pages. And initially, we thought that we only had 80 pages, but it turns out we've got about 240, but we still have the same amount of time. So if I could just see a first draft of all of that in 2 weeks, and then this would be me. I was a copywriter. I didn't have the tools to deal with all that. Why didn't they call me at the beginning so that I could have some of these questions answered however many weeks in advance? Why didn't they include me in the stakeholder interviews? Why didn't they ask me up front to actually scope how much time this is going to take? Here's what I think the core problem is. We still think of content as copywriting. Now, I know that everybody's aware that content isn't just text, it's also video and audio and images and so on, but the bulk of content that we access online is text. And so we assume it's just writing. Everybody has Microsoft Word. Anybody can write. How hard can it be? But this is where we need to begin to shift the way our organizations tackle content development. Because ultimately, this is content. This is the content life cycle. And the minute you publish anything online, the minute anybody even asks for a piece of content, they are entering this maze. And it doesn't just end with create and edit and publish. You can't just launch content and leave it. You've got to take care of it. You have to recognize its life cycle. Okay, let's pause for a second. So I just told you 2 stories, Wall-E and my sad, sad story as a copywriter. Did this at all frame up the content challenge and problem for you in new ways? Did light bulbs kind of go off when I talked about Wall-E, living in this world of trash? where he couldn't find anything, where it had become completely unmanageable, where even though he was showing up day to day in his work, he couldn't ever get ahead of the mess the world had become? And this. How many of you relate to this? How many of you have seen copywriters with this expression on their face? Or subject matter experts? Or the marketing people? Or the HR people? When you come in and you're like, hi, remember I told you 6 weeks ago we were going to need copy from you? We're going to need that now. So here then are two slightly different angles or different frameworks that you can begin to talk about the content problem beyond late content, beyond content that you've just left online to rot. You're beginning to frame up the challenge in a way that you can share it with others in your organization and communicate it to them and convince them that content requires time and attention. So what I'd like to do then is provide you with a couple more tools, a little bit more deep diving about how you can present this argument to your organizations so that you can at least begin to get the writer in the room at the beginning. If nothing else, that will begin to save and streamline your web projects like you would not believe. So, let's talk about content strategy. I can't remember why this slide is in there. So, part of why I think we haven't talked about content strategy for the past 12 or 15 years, and it's been around. This isn't anything new. Nobody just invented content strategy. People have been looking at core strategies for content and planning for content since the web began. But we had all these other disciplines that captured our time and attention. And part of it, I think, is that we hadn't found a really clear, compact way to communicate what content strategy is and how it can help you. So there's this big conversation going on LinkedIn with this content strategy group where some guy was like, I challenge anybody to come up with a really succinct definition of content strategy that anybody is going to be able to understand like that. So this was one of them. I mean, English is my first language, and I don't understand this. So this is where people are starting. Let's take every single thing that content strategy might accomplish or imply and cram it into these two sentences. No, don't do that. We need a quick way. We need an elevator pitch because this is something we have to sell. So to begin, content strategy is just figuring out how content's going to help meet your business objectives. How is it going to be informed by your business strategy? Why are you creating this content? Why are you undertaking this content initiative? If you're not doing it in a way that's either going to make or save you money, if you're not doing it to improve a user experience that you can specifically tie to success metrics, why are you doing it? Because you should? Because it's nice to do? Your bosses and the people who pay money for your work, whose job performance is measured by things other than this was the right thing to do, won't care. So we need to tie your content initiatives to those business objectives. So this is a definition that I've been working with for a couple of years now. And it seems to get the point home pretty quickly, which is that to strategically approach the planning for the creation, delivery, and governance, taking care of your content, is sort of this new idea that we would think about that or focus on that beyond just it's time to fill in the blanks. I don't ever start with this. If I started with this and I was like, let's talk about content strategy, you guys would be like, oh, what's going on Twitter? Maybe you already are. I start with this. Your core content strategy, we talked about this a lot in the workshop yesterday, your core content strategy is just that. What are we trying to do with our content that is going to help us meet business objectives? Content strategy then informs substance. What is the meat of what you're trying to what you want to talk about? What are your key messages? What are your topics? What are the best formats to begin to think about delivering this information in? Structure. Structure is related to information architecture. Lou Rosenfeld said at one point that he believes that IA and content strategy are just two sides of the same coin. which I agree with. Content strategy bridges the gap between the structures that we design and the content that those designs are meant to house and to serve and communicate. Workflow. This is how content moves throughout your organization. This is the people part. This is the messy and the emotional and the political part that you need to be thinking about and planning for to ensure that the right people are given the right amount of time and the right resources and that they have the right skill sets to actually do what it is you are asking them to do. And then finally, governance, which is what are our editorial standards by which we judge and benchmark our content? What is our core content strategy, and when is that going to change or evolve? Who's responsible for that? Who is empowered to say now is the time that we need to change that? So what's important here and what is critical to begin to identify and dig into the roots of the challenge within your unique organizations is that we're not just talking about the content anymore. We're not just talking about that product. We're linking it to the people that are creating it and caring for it. Maybe it's your users that are generating the content. How many of you have started projects where the client is just like, you know, let's not worry about the content. We're just going to have the users generate it all for us. I have. So at any rate, this is where the strategy bridges the two. As user experience designers, you may think there is nothing I can do about this because workflow and governance requires purview into parts of the organization that you simply may not have. The larger your organization, the more complicated those two components are going to be. But your job is to ask the questions that will begin to point people towards considering these as they commit to and request changes for the content. So once you have delivered sort of this simplified version, it may help to expand a little bit. Again, you don't want to start with this. You want to start with what's easy and what hits home. And those definitions may not resonate specifically with you or your organizations. So how can you shift them so that they will? What are the pain points that your boss or your coworkers or your clients are suffering from when it comes to content? Feel free to take any of those definitions and tweak them so that they'll really hear you when you begin to talk about it. So let's talk about this word strategy real quickly. There are lots of different ways. This is one of our favorite topics in the United States is arguing what the real meaning of strategy is and who's doing it and who's not doing it. And I don't care. There's work that needs to be done. Let's do it, and let's do it in a way that helps us meet core objectives. But this is a simple way to begin to help people see strategy. Because I think oftentimes what happens is that when we start talking about strategy, we're talking about big ideas and blue sky, and we spend all this money and all this time coming up with a strategy. And then we hand it over, and we're like, look at this brilliant strategy. And the stakeholders say, well, we can't do that. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough time. This would be great if we had, X number of resources instead. But because it wasn't rooted in reality, because there wasn't any requirement to build a plan of implementation, it just ends up being a good idea that's shoved aside. So I love this quote because basically, if your strategy isn't rooted in the real world, if it can't inform tactics that can actually be implemented, then it's no good. At the same time, when you are undertaking tactical initiatives, which is what we do every single day, and often without any kind of coherent strategy informing them, those aren't any good either. Those are just the hamster running in the wheel. So ultimately, when we are thinking about our content, this is not the only question that we're having answered. We don't just want to know what is the content. This is our domain. This has been our domain as user experience designers for 10, 12 years, identifying what content is it that we actually want to deliver. Let's write down that requirements list. Let's put it all up on our Post-it notes. Let's organize it. Let's deliver it and hope for the best. These are the questions that we want to start asking as soon as possible in the process. Put it to the stakeholders. Put it to the clients. Because ultimately, when you start asking these questions, you will be surprised at how your content requirements begin to shrink. Because they realize, oh, that would be nice, but we're in reality. And we are not going to be able to deliver that, and we're not going to be able to take care of it, which is what that crucial question answers, is what next? So another really important thing, I think, is to actually be able to demonstrate to our stakeholders what happens when you don't plan for content. Nobody likes to go and look at what's on their website. How many of you, I asked this question in my workshop, how many of you know exactly what is on your website, where it lives, what it says, the last time it was touched, and who owns it? Right. I get 2 people back here. I don't know if I believe them. So the thing is, you kind of have to hold a mirror up to their pain. So here's an example of something that this wasn't the client, but I was able to kind of show this as an example that sort of got them thinking. So in February, we celebrate African American or Black History Month in the United States. February 14th is also Valentine's Day. So on February 16th, if you can see that down here, I logged in and I thought, oh, this looks nice. It's a nice design. They've done a good job kind of curating, related articles here. This day in history, this is pretty simple. I should have fun browsing this. So I click on this big graphic for Black History Month. Oh, I'm sorry, and Valentine's Day is the second feature. Now, what's wrong with that? First of all, it's February 16th. So Valentine's Day, over. They didn't have a plan. Nobody was on it. Nobody had it listed on any kind of an editorial calendar that, okay, on February 15th, we need to change this out. So then I click through, and I have Valentine's Day over here again, and then Martin Luther King, talking about Black History Month. So it says this week's highlights up top, and then it says Browse Topics. Now, if you hit Browse Topics, where do you think you're going to go? Related topics, curated topics for Valentine's Day and for Black History Month, right? No, you go here. Browse all topics. This goes on and on and on. So who is taking care of that link? What kind of a promise did they understand that they were making when they posted it there? And what kind of a lazy answer to a huge challenge is this? So then I decided, well, I'm going to look up jazz, because that's part of, for Black History Month, we're often kind of looking into the jazz era and a lot of the black musicians that sort of helped to create that as an important musical movement within the United States. So I searched jazz, and the first thing I get is Benny Goodman brings jazz to Carnegie Hall in 1938. Fine. The next thing I get is Engineering an Empire, Aztecs, and the Jazz Temple. I would have searched Jazz Temple if that's what I were looking for. This makes no sense to me, and it's confusing to me that it shows up. Even like a little thing, did you mean Jazz Temple, before showing me that result, would have helped. This is the result of kind of cloudy tagging. There isn't really a metadata strategy behind here that the content strategist and the CMS folks and the IA got together to work on. So then I go over to the next page, and suddenly I have Andy Warhol, Atlanta, Billy Bragg, who's a country musician, Garth Brooks, another country musician, and James Joyce. I have no idea how I found these results. But again, this is a result of having too much content, wanting to get it all out there, and not having a plan for how you are going to maintain or take care of it. There's no governance plan for the metadata. That's content, and it's necessary to be sure to take care of that so that this doesn't happen to our users. Because after this, I was gone. I was out. I went back to Google, which I don't know how much better that is at this point. So that's a really sort of very clear, if I were an employee with this organization, I would have sat down with the C-level person and said, let's just try this. Give me 10 minutes of your time, and I want you to find information about jazz. This gets light bulbs turning on. So, quotes. So This used to drive me crazy, except now I am a consultant. When I would work, I worked for like a small software company and a mobile phone company before that, and I would say the same thing over and over and over again, and I would get ignored. And then I would bring in a report from Forrester that said the same thing, and they'd go, oh, yeah, that's important. We should do that. Or I would, finally bring in a consultant who would come in and do all this work and all this and then say the same thing, and they'd be like, oh, well, we spent money on that opinion. We should do that. So then I quit. So anytime that you can mine quotes from experts and use those to support your points when you are arguing and defending a case, whether it is for content or anything else with your work, especially experts that you know your stakeholders admire, look at their bookshelves. Listen to them. See who it is that they're quoting. See if you hear them talking about certain conferences or certain articles that they've read. This is the book I talked about yesterday in my workshop. Have you guys read Elements of User Experience? Okay, so yeah, this is required reading for user experience professionals and designers. It came out in 2001, thank you. How did you know that? And it really did sort of lay the foundation for user experience design and the practice as we know it today. He says right here, it's not the IA, it's not the visual design, it's not the interaction design, it's not the applications that you serve up, it's the content. This is why people are coming to your websites. This kind of hurts us a little bit as user experience professionals if we feel like we don't have control over the content. But ultimately, we can begin to inform it, and if not control it, then at least help it along. Because there's nothing that hurts worse than putting your time and attention and emotion and effort into a project only to have it launch and be filled up with terrible content. Anyone? It's happened to anyone? Ever? And now I'm going to tell you a secret. This book that I wrote, I didn't want to write it. I'd been waiting for somebody else to write it for 3 years. I'm very lazy, and writing a book seemed like a lot of work. But we needed a tool, like that consultant's report that said, look, this is real because there's a book on it. And it's red. That's why I wrote this, so that we would have a weapon, so that you would have a weapon, so that you would have something to hand over and say, look, this is important. It's real. The funny thing is that it's actually about jazz. No, it's not really. Also, if anyone thinks that you write books to make money, you don't. So, personalizing your argument. I just came across this quote, and I love it. If you are able to tell stories that spark connections or emotions or insights without actually defining the core issue or the solution, what that does is it opens up the ability for the other person or the other people to begin to come to those conclusions themselves, to begin to think about solutions themselves, rather than you coming in and telling them this is the way to do it. So any of the stories that we've talked about today, steal them. Take them. Take credit for them. They are yours. See if using any of those, I know that eBay Global, when they were first starting to sort of build a case for their content strategy, they used this Wall-E story, and wow, that just took off throughout the organization, and they took credit for it, which was awesome. So, show this. Show other pictures. Say, this is the state of our content. This is something that we need to tackle. Metaphors are also a good thing to be able to talk about. One of the clients that I worked with, the entire way that he was able to get approval to do work with us was by communicating to a variety of people that, look, content is a living thing. Content is not a brick that you put into a house and cement other bricks over it and then walk away. When you put content out there, people are working with it. they're looking at it, they're reading it, they're sharing it, they're passing it on. Within our content management systems, the people who put it out there in the first place are continually going in and tweaking it and changing the tags and adding more stuff. Content does not sit still. Similarly, we need to care for it then as something that is alive. And so we need to tend to it the way that we would tend to a large, delicate plant. We need to consider its environment. We need to think about how it needs to be fed and watered. We need to pay attention to the weather around it. Where are people's emotions? What are the politics happening? What's at play? It's a very fine balance to be able to keep plants alive. And it's just as complex. I kill them all the time. It's just as complex thinking about caring for and keeping our content alive. House metaphors are always very, very powerful when you're talking about the web. If this is your website, painting it green is not going to help it. Putting on a new front door is not going to help it. Even replacing the windows or the furnace in the basement, any of the technology inside, is not going to help it because it's falling down. So where it needs to start is what? The foundation. That's where we start building houses, from the foundation up. And the foundation of any kind of digital communication platform is the content. What do we need it to do? Where do we need to deliver it? What does it need to be? What do our users expecting? What do our businesses need to put online? So that is the only place that you can begin to build from the ground up. And then finally, draw. Pictures are good. People like pictures. We actually at Confab, we gave everybody a poster that just sort of like talks about all the different aspects of content strategy. And we were like, put this up in your cube, put it up on your wall, put it up on your door when you get back, see what happens. And that was 3 days ago, and we've already been getting tons of feedback. Wow, people are stopping by and asking me, what is this? What's content strategy? Here's some part of what I do. I never realized it was connected to this. So visuals are incredibly important when you're beginning to introduce this idea. This one, take it, use it. Merry Christmas. This is actually where that started. We put this together 18 months ago, and this was the first time that we were like, oh, we think that this might help people understand what content strategy is. And it's evolved to the other. But again, what's important about this? The circle, the constant movement, never being able to just forget about that content. Here's another version of it. And another. And another. This one scares people a little bit. It's good. You guys are designers, right? Even if you can't draw. My 6-year-old is constantly telling me, Mom, I am so much a better drawer than you, which is true. What kinds of pictures can you draw that will help to bring home the fact that content is touched by so many different areas of the organization that we need to begin to create some core processes and methodologies that will serve all of these different content owners' needs? This one I like because it shows how the content strategist can make a bridge. Writer, programmer, IA, IXD, visual designer. All these people need to be talking to each other about what? The content. Because that's what people are coming for. So finally then, I know that you all have goals. Even if one of those goals is just to like your job when you get out of bed in the morning. If you can begin to put together a vision beyond yourself, beyond the work that you do, even beyond your own career path, to what do I want the process in which I am involved to look like? What is the quality of the end product that I want to deliver? Where can I find information that I can read and watch and listen to that will begin to round out my knowledge of my profession? You're here. That's a critically important, wonderful investment of your time and energy. So, if this is where we have started, what I would like to suggest is that by raising the argument for content strategy, by beginning to communicate about it as a reality and a challenge that can be met, by opening yourselves up to being a part of that conversation, whether or not you think it's anything that you can have impact on, whether you are a developer or a visual designer, an interaction designer, a project manager, an account manager, just start asking questions. Because if this is our vision, a world in which content is findable, that it's all useful and usable, it is consistent in voice and tone, it's relevant to us as users, and it helps our users throughout their life cycle with our business, then you have something to work towards. This is my vision for what the web can look like. And so I hope that I've given you some tools today that will help you begin to create a vision for yourselves and work together to achieve it. Thank you. Now I come over to the red couch. Am I supposed to sit on the red couch? No, I'm going to stand by the red couch. Any questions? Yeah. You need a mic. Oh, here it comes. This is always the part where I feel like Oprah.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing that current content management systems, despite their name, allow you to do absolutely jack with your content?
Is that a trick question?
I can't decide.
You can't decide. Here's what I think the challenge is with content management systems. We got so excited about the technology and the features of what they could do, and the salespeople were so good at saying, even though you maybe just want to start off with riding a bicycle, I'd like to sell you a Hummer, that we lost sight of what it was for, which is to care for our content over time, our living content, and to make information flow without our organization simple and easy. There's a great blog called The CMS Myth, myth.com, that suggests, we thought that technology was going to be the answer for all of our digital communications, and it so was not. I think that existing legacy systems for content management can be used effectively, but you've got to start by designing for people. You've got to start by designing a real-world workflow within your organization. You can't just leave it up to the IT team to do their best. And that also, the responsibility falls with the people who are going to be using it, which I've heard over and over from IT teams, that no one wants to talk about it. They just want it to get done, but then when it does get done, then everybody wants to talk about it. So do I think they're useful? Yes. Do I think they need to be designed for people? Yes. Does that help? Anything else? Great. Okay. Thank you.